A moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new.
The only difference is imperialism shifted from Britain to the US, and that's where the control of the academia. I think once a sufficient amount of scholarship is generated in multiple spheres, I am not somebody who says that leftist view of history is wrong. I believe Marx's contribution, materialist interpretation of history was a huge contribution to understanding history, right? But to assume that everything is only based on materialism, and especially we who come from an area where spiritualism played such a role, so to say that that history has only one direction and it is entirely explained by materialist clauses is wrong, and that is where your problem is. I think when in 1947 suddenly we jumped all the old history saying that it's communal, and the new guy said we will reimagine history and say this is what was the truth. There was such Ganga, Jamni, Tahzeeb, this, that, everything was lovely till the British came and then ruined everybody. No, that wasn't the case. I mean, we had problems, we had these things. We need to tell it all. We don't have to be partisan. We don't have to say one view is wrong. But both views need to come into the thing. Then only you get a balance. Because there is no one view of history. History can be told in many ways. And there are many perspectives to it. The minute everybody agrees that my perspective is not necessarily wrong, yours is also wrong. Somewhere, truth may lie somewhere in between. Then we will have a more rational dialogue. But for that, ordinary people have to be convinced that this way of thinking makes a lot of sense and gels with them what happens in their life.
So the poetry, a lot of Indian history, the Puranas and the epics, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata and the Puranas are called itihasas collectively. Itihasa itself translating it to it thus happened. But then there are stories, embedded in that is the historical truth. So it's not dry collation of only facts. So what do you do with these sources then? The Indian version of what history and historiography needs to be, it's I think beautifully summarized in this couplet, shlok in Sanskrit, which says dharmartha kama mokshana upadesha samanvitam kathayuktam puravritam itihasam ta chakshmati. What does that mean? That puravritam or narratives of the past that are told to you in a kathayuktam, in a story form, which will guide you in the in the pursuit of the four limbs of humanity, dharma, artha, kama and moksha. That is deemed as itihasa or history. So in that there is space for stories, there is also a didactic element to it of upadesha or advice. There is a moral fabric to what history is supposed to do. So I think there is a need when we talk of popular history, academic history, to I think indigenize and Indianize our way of looking at our own past.
But I would argue that if the British hadn't come, or hadn't been allowed to grow and expand the way they did, that we would probably have ended up not very different from Japan. That is, the Marathas were already expanding throughout India. They were parking subordinate rulers everywhere. So Shambhaji was ruling in Tanjavur, which is why Sambar was invented to please his palate, which many people don't realize. Sambar was invented for a Maratha, not by us South Indians, for ourselves. And you had the Mughal emperor essentially serving as a hostage of the Marathas. The Marathas told him what to say, what to do, what firman to issue, what seal to apply. The only thing that clobbered the Marathas were two things: the third battle of Panipat, where Ahmad Shah Abdali hammered the Marathas, and the Maratha ditch that stopped them taking the riches of Bengal. The Maratha ditch built by the British East India Company. So if there was no British, I believe that whatever happened in India would have been something like the Japanese shogunate, where you would have had a constitutional monarch, the Mughal emperor would be the symbol and figurehead, the real power would be in the hands of Maratha warriors. There would be Peshwas sort of all over the country, controlling provinces. And eventually, as happened in Japan, they would I hope, begin to modernize and democratize by the 20th century. What's interesting is, however, the notion that you needed to be colonized to have railways. There are lots of countries in the world that bought and paid for railways without going to the trouble and expense of being colonized. So I'm quite sure that that is more likely, my theory is a lot more likely than the Dutch, who had just been humiliated in the Battle of Colachel, actually taking over the whole of India. I think that they tried from the south, couldn't make it up. No chance.
But a question I want to ask you, which reveals the secret at the heart of the Indian novel. What can novels do that other forms can't do? In the first 30 or 40 years of the Indian novel, say between 1860 to 1910, why are so many novels, obviously they're written by men, almost 95% of them, because of the way Indian society and education was set up. So that's, you can take that's a given. But why are so many novels about a woman, with the name of a woman character? Indulekha, Indira, Basanti. What is going on here? Rajmohan's wife. Even when the name is of a man, the focus is on the second word, wife. What is going on here? Why are all these men choosing a female protagonist to write about? They have no access to they've never worn a sari or put kumkum in their hair, whatever. So how do they know what to write about? And why are they focused on women? And the answer is, or my answer is, you could have a different answer, and that would be a good debate to have, that the novel is very good at producing the outsider's gaze, or the gaze of the person who's marginalized in society. Bollywood is great at reproducing mass thought, and perhaps with I laugh when sometimes a Bollywood film is called feminist or whatever because of some small tweak in the thinking. But a novel is very good at, stories become interesting when they give you the mind or the life experience of somebody very different from you. And all these male writers who wanted to criticize Indian society found that they could do so usually through the viewpoint of a young woman who's not only oppressed by patriarchy, they're also oppressed by the older women in the society. The mother-in-laws are the ones saying you can't read, you can't go out.